I sat on the back steps of the old cottage, watching ivy crawl over the cracked window panes, like the house was trying to hide itself from me. Rain leaked through the roof into a rusty pot in the corner, ping, ping, ping in a slow, mocking rhythm. This was what I inherited. My childhood home, now little more than a skeleton of memories and wood rot. A week earlier, we had all stood in the cold office of my parents' lawyer. My brother Nolan leaned back in his chair like he owned the building. And he might as well have. He'd always been their favorite, their chosen one, the one they dressed in designer coats for family photos while I wore whatever didn't itch. The lawyer's voice was flat. The family estate in Willow Glen goes to Mr. Nolan Avery. My stomach sank. And to Miss Emily Avery, the Lakeview property. My eyes met Nolan's. He smirked, because we both knew what Lakeview really was. Not a lake house, not a cabin. Just a rotting one-story shack near the dried-up edge of what used to be a lake. It hadn't been called Lakeview since the drought 10 years ago. My parents hadn't visited it since I was 16. Not after it became the place they shipped me to every time I disappointed them. When I failed calculus, when I said I didn't want to be a dentist, when I told them I was going to art school instead of law. Now it was mine, the punishment gift, a reminder of where they thought I belonged. I should have expected it. At the memorial service for our mother, Nolan gave the eulogy. I wasn't asked. I just poured the wine afterward. "You know how Mom was," he whispered to me too close. "Traditional. You never quite fit her mold." "She could have said that to my face," I muttered. "She did," he said. And maybe she had, with every ignored birthday, every family photo I was told to take instead of be in, every dinner where my paintings were laughed off while Nolan's golf swing got a toast. But something was different now. Standing in the wreckage of Lakeview, I didn't feel defeated. I felt alert, curious, like something here hadn't been meant for him to find. I started pulling open drawers, old bills, unopened mail, a cracked teacup. In the closet, behind old coats, I found a locked metal box. No key. Under the floorboard where the stove used to sit, I found a torn envelope. No letter, but inside was a deed. Not for Lakeview, but for Willow Glen, signed, dated, and bearing one name, Emily Avery. I stared at the deed, my hands trembling. The signature was unmistakable, my mother's cursive, neat and cold like her Sunday letters. The date was strange, though, 3 years ago. That would have been right after her second heart surgery. Why would she sign Willow Glen over to me then? Only to leave it to Nolan now. I grabbed my phone and took photos of every page. Then I slipped the deed back into the envelope and tucked it under the loose floorboard again. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to be smart. My parents raised me to be small, not stupid. That night, I sat by the fireplace, trying to light damp wood. The lighter wouldn't catch, and the wind howled through the cracks like it was warning me. I wrapped myself in 2 old quilts and stared at the ceiling until sleep stole me. In my dream, my mother was sitting at the Willow Glen piano, playing the same cold waltz she always did when she was disappointed. Only this time, every note cracked the floor beneath me, and Nolan stood in the corner, smiling, handing out pieces of the house like they were party favors. I woke up with a jolt. Something didn't add up. If the deed said I owned Willow Glen, then the version Nolan got, the one the lawyer read, had to be a newer document. But that would mean either she changed her mind, or someone changed the paperwork. And Nolan had always been good at convincing people to look the other way, especially when it came to the family name. I looked around the cottage again, the way the foundation was bowing, the black mold creeping up the bedroom wall, the termite bites in the baseboard. They gave me the decay, so I could never rise from it. But they forgot one thing. I knew how to rebuild. I drove into town the next morning with dirt under my nails and an envelope full of questions. The legal office that had handled the will wasn't far. A red brick building with spotless glass and a receptionist who looked like she'd never touched a day of dust in her life. I gave my name and was told the lawyer was unavailable indefinitely due to a family emergency. Convenient. I asked for a copy of the will. The receptionist smiled politely and said, "We'll email it." I asked if they could print it instead. Something in me didn't trust servers and clouds anymore. She agreed, reluctantly, and handed me a sealed folder minutes later. I took it, nodded, and left without saying a word. Back in my car, I opened it. It was dated 11 months ago. That was the twist in the gut. The deed I found was signed 3 years ago. Something had changed in between. Either my mother had changed her mind, or someone had changed the papers. I drove to Willow Glen. Yes, I know how that sounds. I told myself it was curiosity, but it was more than that. I wanted to see what had been taken, what Nolan now called his legacy property. The estate was still as grand as I remembered. Tall hedges, wrought iron gate, the manicured kind of wealth that smelled like lavender, and silence. But it felt hollow. The windows were dark, the driveway empty. I parked down the road and walked the gravel path on foot. A maintenance truck pulled up behind me. The man in it looked confused. "You with the Avery family?" he asked. "I was," I said. "You Emily?" he asked, squinting. My chest tightened. "Yeah." He scratched his head. "You're the one that used to come with the art stuff. You fixed the window seat." My mouth parted slightly. I had, when I was 16. I'd spent 2 summers sanding that bench and drawing on the underside of the lid. No one knew but me. And yet, this stranger did. He leaned closer, lowered his voice. "Miss Avery, I probably shouldn't say this, but your mom told us this place was going to you. Said it herself, said you'd know what to do with it." I froze. "She said that?" "Twice," he nodded. "Few years back. We even did some renovations per your name on a work order. But then one day, boom, everything changed. She stopped talking about you. Mr. Nolan started showing up instead." My pulse quickened. Do you still have that work order?" I asked. He scratched his chin. "Might. I'll check the file room." I gave him my number, my real one. Then I walked back to the car with my breath caught between fear and rage. She did choose me. Someone just erased it. Back at Lakeview, I spread out the documents across the sagging dining table, organizing every copy I had. The old deed with my name, the new will, and now a note from the maintenance man confirming the work order. It was dated almost exactly 1 month before my mother's second heart attack. I stared at the handwriting. My mother had approved renovations under Miss Emily Avery's future direction. Future direction. Not Nolan? Me. I remembered that summer so clearly now. The one time she called me out of the blue and said, "Come up to the estate, I want your opinion on the sunroom." I thought she was being kind, maybe forgiving, maybe even proud. I never thought it meant more. But someone had made sure it meant nothing. I picked up my phone and texted Nolan. Just a photo of the old deed, no words. He didn't reply, not for hours. When he did, it was just one line. "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer. Instead, I drove back into town and requested a search on property title changes from the courthouse clerk. She was old school, sweet, but thorough. After a few minutes of typing, she frowned. "That's odd," she said. "What is?" "There was a quiet title claim filed 2 months before your mother died. Someone disputed ownership on Willow Glen. Said there was a conflicting deed." I leaned in. "Who filed it?" She looked again. And my blood ran cold. "My father, the man who died 3 weeks after the title cleared to Nolan." I whispered, "Can I get a copy?" She nodded. You'll have to sign a request. It might take a few days. I signed it. My hand didn't even shake. Because now I knew this wasn't favoritism, this wasn't family tradition, this was a cover-up. And it was almost perfect. Almost. The documents arrived 5 days later. I had barely slept in that time, the wind at Lakeview wailing through the chimney like the ghosts of the life I was never allowed to live. But when the envelope slid under my door, hand-delivered from the county clerk, I felt something shift in me, like the storm had finally handed me a match. I opened the packet slowly. Inside were copies of the quiet title filing, and there, in black ink, was the claim. The previous deed signed to Miss Emily Avery is believed to be a clerical mistake. Mrs. Avery had verbally reassigned property to her son, Nolan Avery, and is no longer of sound mind due to medical complications. My hands trembled. My father had declared her mentally unfit to reverse a legally filed document 3 months before her death. And the sickest part? He used her illness to erase me. The same man who used to say, "You think you're smarter than your brother, Em? You'll always be behind him. That's just nature." Now he'd signed my future away with a lie, filed and sealed before her heart ever gave out. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pulled out my laptop. I didn't call a lawyer. I called someone better. Marta Singh, my old roommate from college, now a corporate fraud investigator. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but she picked up on the second ring. "Emily?" she said, surprised. "I need help," I said. "Someone forged legal grounds to strip me of a property deed." I explained everything. The 2 conflicting documents, the work order, the county's quiet title transfer. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. "You still have that forensic handwriting kit I gave you in undergrad?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "Because we're going to prove it wasn't your mother who revoked the deed. We're going to prove it was your father. Or, worse, your brother." That night, I pulled the original deed back out and scanned it into my computer. I compared it to the signature on the will Nolan presented. I magnified the curves, the slant, the tremble. And I knew my mother's real signature was always strong, even at her weakest. She practiced it. She said women should always sign their names like they're signing laws. The one on Nolan's will? It was shaky, almost mimicked. I stared at it for hours. They forged her. They didn't just doubt her. They faked her. The rage that filled my chest wasn't hot. It was cold, clear, the kind of rage you use to build something indestructible. I didn't respond to Nolan's texts. Instead, I called the local paper, the one that loved legacy stories, and I told them I had one. The editor at the Willow Glen Sentinel called me back the next day. His voice was cautious, but curious. "We don't usually publish inheritance disputes," he said, "but if what you're alleging is true, and we can verify the forgery—" "I don't need you to publish names yet," I said. "Just ask questions, quietly. There are contractors who did work under my name, a maintenance man, neighbors who knew my mother's intentions. Ask them what she said." He agreed. And within 48 hours, word began to ripple through town. I didn't see Nolan for days, but I didn't have to. I heard about him. First, from Marta. She called and laughed through the phone. "He's filed a sudden request to close public access to the property records. That's panic mode." Then from the woman at the cafe near the estate. "Your brother came in last night, real angry. Said something about false stories and people turning against him." And finally, from the lawyer's assistant, the same one who had smiled coldly at me during the will reading. She emailed me a single sentence. "You weren't supposed to find it." That was when I knew. They all thought I'd stay small, that I'd accept mold and broken floorboards while Nolan drank whiskey in a sunlit library built on my mother's forgotten intentions. I returned to the Lakeview cottage and opened the box Marta sent by overnight courier, a professional handwriting analysis kit. Under her instructions, I took high-resolution scans of both signatures and ran them through the software. The report came back in red letters: signature match, 37%, which meant it wasn't my mother. And that meant everything else Nolan built could now legally crumble. That same evening, as rain started to drizzle over the porch roof, my phone buzzed. Nolan. I let it ring, then again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "You're making a mess," he snapped. "Whatever game you think you're playing." I cut him off. "I'm not playing, I'm reclaiming." He exhaled hard. "You don't even know what you're doing. You're going to embarrass the family. Ruin everything." "There is no family," I said coldly. "Just a thief and a trail." He paused. "You don't want to start a war, Em." "I didn't," I said. "But you did. The moment you took what was mine." Then I hung up. I sat in silence afterward, staring at the growing stack of documents and notes like they were bricks. Not just for a case, but for a future. I was no longer interested in simply proving him wrong. I wanted to rebuild what they tried to bury, and name every room after the parts of me they erased. After I hung up on Nolan, the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was loaded, like the pause before a courtroom verdict or the breath before a final move in chess. He wasn't used to me being quiet and confident. He was used to me pleading, shrinking, apologizing. But those days were over. The next day, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 8 years. Janet, my mother's former friend. The only one who used to sneak me strawberry candies during those unbearable family-only dinners. She didn't waste time. "Emily," she said, "I don't know what you've uncovered, but people are talking. And you should know. Your mother did intend for you to have Willow Glen." I swallowed. "Then why didn't she say anything?" "She tried, more than once. But your father shut her down every time. Claimed you'd waste the land on art projects and emotions. Her words, not mine." I felt my throat tighten. "She was proud of you," Janet said, gentler now. "After your gallery opening in Portland, she kept the flyer. Said you turned pain into something beautiful." A silence stretched between us. "I just thought you should know," she added. "Not everyone believed the lie." After we hung up, I opened a dusty filing cabinet I'd almost ignored in the back room of Lakeview. In the bottom drawer, beneath some yellowed tax documents, I found it. My mother's handwriting, in a floral card I'd never seen before. "Emily, if you find this, it means they went through with it. I'm sorry, I tried. Please don't let them erase you." My chest heaved, but no tears came. Just purpose. I scanned it immediately and sent it to Marta. She called in minutes. "This is it," she said. "This is intent. Between this and the forged signature, we've got enough to formally challenge the will." I nodded slowly. "I'm filing the motion tomorrow." "Emily," Marta paused. "You understand what you're doing, right? If you win this, you don't just get the estate." "I know," I said. "I get everything Nolan was willing to lie for." She exhaled. "And if you lose, then I still get something." "What?" My voice back. That night, as wind rustled the dead leaves outside, I sat on the porch of the rotting house my parents thought would break me. And I made a list. Not of revenge, but of restoration. Every corner of Willow Glen I would rebuild. Every name I would put on the plaques. Every room I would turn into proof that the discarded daughter doesn't disappear. She inherits. The courthouse smelled like old ink and polished stone. I wore black, not out of mourning, but as armor. Marta walked beside me, her briefcase in one hand, her expression unreadable. She wasn't just here as a friend anymore. She was my legal counsel. We filed the petition to challenge the will at 9:04 a.m. sharp. Within hours, the town knew. The Sentinel published a small article on the case, just 3 paragraphs long. It didn't name names, not yet, but it mentioned a disputed inheritance between adult siblings involving potential document forgery and elder coercion. And in a place like Willow Glen, that was enough. By that evening, the calls started. First, from the Historical Society president. "Emily, I had no idea your name was even tied to the estate. Your mother always praised your designs." Then from my high school art teacher. "I just want you to know I believe you. Your family always treated you like the ghost in the room." And finally, from the county record keeper herself. "We've opened a formal inquiry into the title transfer. If there was fraud, we'll find it." Meanwhile, Nolan was silent. Not a single word. But silence doesn't mean stillness. It means strategy. And I knew my brother well enough to know. When he's quiet, he's planning how to rewrite the ending. So I prepared. I gathered everything. Photos of my mother's signature, copies of the original deed, testimonies from contractors, neighbors, even Janet, who wrote a signed affidavit describing conversations with my mother about passing Willow Glen to me. I wasn't building a case, I was building a mirror. One he couldn't look into without watching his lies crack wide open. Then came the fundraiser. Every year, Willow Glen hosted a silent auction for the local conservatory. This year's event, held in the ballroom of a historic inn, was supposed to be Nolan's stage, the golden boy of the Avery family, donating a bottle of estate wine with his name on it. I RSVP'd the day before. I didn't walk in with a lawyer or bodyguard. I walked in with a framed print of my mother's handwritten card, the one I found at Lakeview. I didn't say a word. I just left it on the silent auction table, tucked beneath his wine bottle, with a small note. "In memory of the woman who knew her daughter was worthy." By the time Nolan saw it, 3 people had already taken photos, and one of them was a local blogger who lived for Avery family drama. The next morning, a photo of the note appeared online with the caption, "The Forgotten Avery Speaks." That was the moment the town picked a side. Not his, mine. That morning, I woke up to 24 missed notifications. Texts, emails, a voicemail from a woman I hadn't spoken to since childhood. "Emily," it said, "I saw the blog. I always wondered why your mom stopped talking about you. I thought you left. But now I get it." I sat on the edge of the mattress in Lakeview, my phone glowing in my palm, and I realized something. This wasn't just about land or money. It was about my name. And they were starting to say it again. Nolan, though, couldn't let that happen. By afternoon, his damage control was in full swing. He posted a photo of our mother online, black and white, tasteful, captioned with a soft remembrance. "She taught us strength. She loved this town." Comments rolled in, some supportive, some suspicious. Then he added a story. "I'm heartbroken by what's happening," he wrote. "Family is complicated, but I stand by what my mother intended, for Willow Glen to continue the Avery legacy through me." It was smooth, carefully worded, not defensive, not aggressive, just mournful. But I saw the tactic. He was playing the grief card, trying to bury truth under sympathy, and it might have worked if people hadn't started to remember who I really was. One woman commented, "Funny how Emily was the one who restored the greenhouse that summer. I remember. Nolan never touched a shovel." Another, "I taught Emily. She used to draw floor plans in the margins of her homework. That house was her dream." And my favorite, "If family is complicated, maybe don't erase the daughter who turned your broken windows into stained glass." By the end of the day, Nolan disabled comments. That night, I lit a candle in the cottage and wrote a short letter. Not to Nolan, to the town, to be printed in the next Sunday edition. Because I was no longer asking for justice. I was showing what it looked like. The letter ran on a Sunday morning. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't even angry. It was a simple column, signed only with my initials, tucked in the community section between an article about the farmer's market and a church bake sale. But it landed like thunder. In it, I wrote, "When someone is erased quietly, you learn to speak quietly back. When a daughter is told you get the cottage and he gets the estate, you learn to turn broken beams into something solid. But legacy is not in square footage. It's in what survives after cruelty. And sometimes it's not the mansion that endures. It's the girl in the crumbling house with the truth and a match." By noon, the Sentinel's website crashed. By nightfall, 3 more former employees of Willow Glen came forward, each confirming that they'd been told verbally and in writing that I was the rightful heir. One of them even had a printed memo with my name on the top, dated before my mother's last hospitalization. I printed every one of them, filed them into the binder Marta made me call the Resurrection Book. "Nolan?" He waited. Then, on Monday, he came to Lakeview. He didn't knock. I found him on the porch, leaning against the wooden beam like he owned it. "Nice letter," he said. "Didn't use your name," I replied. "You didn't have to." He looked around at the peeling paint, the chipped window frames. "You really staying here?" "I rebuilt the back roof last week. Found a wasp nest the size of your ego." He chuckled, but it was hollow. Then he dropped the act. "Tell me what you want," he said. "I want the truth." "You already have that." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I want to know why. Why erase me? Why steal it? I never even wanted it until you made it a battlefield." He looked away. "Because she was going to give it to you. All of it. Not just the estate, the business, the name period." I froze. "What business?" He scoffed. "You really didn't know. She was about to sign over the Avery Foundation to you. She didn't trust me. Said I was too hungry for appearance. Said you had heart." He said it like it was an insult. "She wrote the paperwork. Then she got sick again. Dad told me. Said we had to protect what she built. So I did." "You forged her will, Nolan." "I protected the family name." "No," I said coldly. "You rebranded it." He stepped forward. "You think anyone really cares if the ink on a signature wavers? They care about image, presence, control. You don't know how to play the game." "That's where you're wrong," I said, stepping past him and into the cottage. "I just changed the rules." He didn't follow me inside because he knew. The match was lit. The courthouse was busier this time. Not with reporters, not yet, but with murmurs, eyes that looked twice, whispers that stopped when I walked in. We filed for a formal criminal inquiry into document forgery, elder coercion, and property fraud. Marta handed the papers to the clerk without hesitation. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. "You're not invisible anymore." I didn't smile back, because Nolan wasn't finished, and I could feel it. 2 days later, I got the email. No sender name, no subject line, just a PDF attachment. I opened it. It was a scanned page from my mother's journal. The header read, "Will revision, final draft, must deliver to attorney Thursday." Below it, in her handwriting, was a note. "Nolan keeps asking about the estate. I'm afraid he suspects the change. He says Emily will waste it all. But I've seen how she rebuilds. That's what legacy is. Not preservation, but transformation." And then, scrawled in red ink across the bottom, "If something happens to me, promise me they won't silence her again." My breath left my lungs. It wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about silencing her. And me. That evening, the local news picked up the story. Not the blog, not whispers, the evening broadcast. They ran the piece with the headline, "Avery Family Legacy Under Investigation." Sister alleges forged will, hidden intentions. The anchor kept her tone neutral, but the facts were impossible to ignore. Nolan called me that night. I didn't answer. He sent a message instead. "You're destroying everything. Is that what she would have wanted?" I stared at the text for a long time. Then I replied, "She wanted me. That's what you couldn't stand." The next morning, I drove to Willow Glen. Not the cottage, the estate. I stood at the iron gate as a gardener swept leaves from the path. When he looked up and saw me, his face lit up. "Miss Avery?" he asked. "You're back?" "I never got to be here in the first place," I said softly. He looked confused, then nodded. "It's yours, you know. Always was," she told us. I clenched the keys Marta had secured through the court. Temporary access, pending investigation. But I didn't open the gate. Not yet, because I had one more piece to uncover. The original will, the real one. And I had a feeling I knew exactly where Nolan buried it. The gate creaked open with a slow resistance, like even the metal remembered who it once belonged to. Willow Glen looked different. Not in structure. The facade was still regal, the shutters still white, but in soul. It felt like a stage dressed for someone else's performance. Flowers too symmetrical, paint too fresh, as if Nolan had wiped every trace of our mother's hands off the walls. But he missed a few fingerprints. The moment I stepped inside, the scent hit me. Not cologne or cleaner. Lilies, my mother's favorite, the same she'd keep in old tea tins around her workroom, always half-wilted but defiantly alive. I walked past the grand staircase. My boots echoed on the tile. Nolan had replaced the carpet with marble. Too cold, too proud. The door to the old sunroom was locked, but the key was still in the planter, right where Mom always left it, beneath the fake geranium. Inside, everything was covered in white sheets, except one box, tucked under the writing desk, plain, wooden, unmarked. I dropped to my knees and pulled it free. It wasn't locked. Inside were letters, dozens, all written in my mother's script, some addressed to the county assessor, some to her lawyer. One labeled, "In the event of legal dispute," and beneath them, a manila envelope with my name. I opened it. Inside were two things. The original will, signed, notarized, and dated a full 6 months before her final hospitalization, and a photograph. Me and her, in the sunroom. I was holding a tiny glass bird I'd made in high school. She was smiling at me like I held the sun. On the back, she'd written, "Give her everything, she'll build light out of ruins." Tears slid down my cheeks. Not from sadness, from clarity. She knew Nolan would come for it all, she knew Dad would lie, but she trusted me to survive, to rise. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun around. Nolan, he didn't speak at first, just stared at the box in my lap like it was a live grenade. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "I should have been here all along," I replied. He took a step forward. "You don't understand. This place, it needs someone who can handle pressure. The board, the foundation, the expectations. It needs someone who doesn't lie to protect their ego," I said. "It needs someone who remembers what she stood for." He looked down at the will in my hands. "That document, it won't hold in court. It's out of date." "It's valid," I said, lifting it like a sword. "Signed, witnessed, and buried by you." He went pale, and I smiled. "You didn't bury me, Nolan. You buried yourself." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Just 12 pew-like benches, soft yellow walls, and a judge who looked like he'd seen 1,000 family feuds, but still hadn't grown numb to them. Marta stood beside me at the plaintiff's table, calm and composed, while Nolan sat with his attorney on the other side. Hair too neatly combed, suit too expensive, hands trembling only when he thought no one noticed. But I noticed. Everyone did now. The media hadn't exploded overnight. It had brewed like a storm. After the blog, after the letter, after the photo on the auction table. Now every regional outlet had picked it up. The town was no longer whispering. They were watching. The judge asked for opening remarks. Marta didn't flinch. Your Honor, we present not only an earlier valid will, but direct evidence of intentional forgery, witness tampering, and coercion by the defendant, Mr. Nolan Avery, to obtain the Avery estate under false pretenses. We will prove this through signed testimony, original documents, and recovered communications. Then Nolan's lawyer stood up. He smiled, not at the judge, at the press in the back row. Your Honor, this is a deeply unfortunate dispute between grieving siblings. Our position is simple. My client executed his mother's wishes. We believe the plaintiff, while well-meaning, is relying on outdated paperwork and a desire for emotional retribution. I almost laughed. Well-meaning? He made me sound like a school teacher who got lost on her way to the real world. But I said nothing, because Marta slid a photo across the table. It was the letter, the one my mother had written on floral paper hidden in Lakeview's drawer. The judge lifted it, read it silently. His eyes darkened. We rested our case that afternoon. That night, I sat in the old sunroom of Willow Glen, the original will spread across the desk. I didn't need to win a house. I'd already rebuilt a home in myself, but what I needed was for history to remember correctly that I wasn't just the girl in the cottage. The verdict was read on a rainy Thursday. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder. Local neighbors who used to cross the street when they saw me now sat near the front, silent, waiting. I didn't look at Nolan. He was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes red-rimmed. Not from grief, from the fear of watching something he'd built on lies begin to crumble. The judge's voice echoed. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that the later will was executed under suspicious and coercive circumstances. The earlier, original will, dated 6 months prior, is hereby reinstated as the legal testament of Margaret Avery. There was a pause. Ownership of the Willow Glen estate and all associated holdings are awarded to Emily Avery. No clapping, no gasps, just that sharp, powerful silence when truth finally lands. Nolan didn't look at me. He just stood and walked out. That was the last time I ever saw him. I later heard he moved to another state, started a vineyard somewhere in California. He kept the Avery name, but it never meant what it used to, because I reclaimed what it stood for. Not wealth, not power, resilience, rebirth. I didn't throw a party or parade when the deed officially transferred to my name. I spent that day alone in the old greenhouse behind the estate, the one we'd let rot for years. I fixed the door, cleared the debris, hung the same wind chimes my mother loved. And then I built something new, a design scholarship fund in her name. For girls who were overlooked, erased, told to stay in the crumbling house and leave the world to their brothers. I called it the Light After Ruin Fund. Each application started with one question. What have they told you that you'd never be? I never answered that question for myself out loud, because I already had, in stone, in courtroom records, in legacy. Years later, they asked me to speak at the town gala. I stood on the estate balcony in a dress my mother would have called too modern and told the crowd, my brother got the mansion, I got the ashes, and from those, I built something no one could take. My story, my mother's truth, and a legacy that doesn't need marble to stand. The applause was soft at first, then rising, then thunderous. I didn't cry. I just looked up at the stars and whispered, you didn't fail, Mom. You just ran out of time, but I finished it for you. And for the first time in my life, I felt like Willow Glen finally came home. I was the daughter who didn't disappear. Nolan made one last move. The night before the final ruling, he called a press conference outside the estate. Lights, microphones, perfectly rehearsed remorse. He admitted to misinterpreting documents and letting ambition cloud better judgment. And then he said my name. Emily deserves grace. I hope she finds it in her heart to forgive me. We're still family. I didn't show up. Instead, I sent a note to the Sentinel. Forgiveness isn't owed to those who bury the truth and call it grief. I didn't rise to be family again. I rose to be free.